Inside the house, the floorboards groaned beneath him. The room was empty, but the silence was unsettling. There was no dust or decay. It was as though time had stopped here. The whispers began faintly in the distance. Jacob's heart began to race. The whispers grew louder, now clearer. "Join us forever," they seemed to say. He froze, but saw nothing. He slowly turned around, but the room was empty still. The temperature dropped suddenly. Jacob shivered as he walked deeper into the house. Each step felt heavier, as if something was pulling him toward the heart of the building. The whispers followed him now, growing in volume. At the end of the hall, Jacob found a doorway. The shadows seemed to grow darker as he approached. The house seemed to breathe with him. He stepped through the doorway despite the cold grip of fear in his chest. In the center of the room stood a woman, her back turned toward him. Her long hair hung in front of her face. She wore a tattered gown but did not move. The room felt suffocating, as though something unseen was pressing in. Jacob's breath caught in his throat. The woman's head slowly turned toward him. Her eyes were hollow, empty sockets that seemed to pierce through his very soul. Her mouth opened, but no words came, just an eerie rasping sound. "Why do you come?" the woman asked in a voice that was not hers. It sounded like 1,000 tortured souls crying at once. Jacob's body froze as the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch toward him. Jacob tried to move, but the shadows began to grow longer. They stretched out like hands reaching for him. He stumbled back, but the door had disappeared. The room was closing in on him. The woman took a slow step forward. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, her voice now dark and twisted. "Now you'll join us forever." Jacob turned to flee, but the shadows wrapped around him like chains. He screamed, but no sound came. The darkness pulled him in until his vision blurred and his body grew weak. The whispers grew louder. "Join us forever," the voices called. The darkness consumed him. His body felt cold and lifeless. His soul was torn from him as the house claimed him completely. The house fell silent again. The whispers faded as though satisfied. The room became still and empty once more. The house had claimed yet another victim. Across the empty fields, a figure appeared, walking toward the house. The whispers began to stir once more. The house was alive. It was hungry. "Join us forever," the whispers called. The house waited once more for its next victim. The cycle would continue for as long as the house stood. The figure stepped closer to the house. His footsteps were slow and deliberate, as though he knew exactly what awaited him. His breath was steady, but his heart thudded against his chest. He had heard the stories, the rumors about the house, but something drew him in, something that whispered his name. As he reached the front door, it creaked open on its own. The wind howled faintly, as though the house was welcoming him inside. He stepped over the threshold, his skin prickling with a sense of doom. He could feel the presence of the house pressing against him like an invisible force. Inside the house, the air was thick with cold and dust. The hallway stretched endlessly before him. The whispers were faint at first, just a soft murmur echoing from somewhere deep within the house. He hesitated, but continued walking toward the sound. As he moved deeper into the house, the whispers became clearer. It was as though the walls themselves were speaking to him. "Join us forever," they whispered. Their voices were low but unmistakable. They seemed to come from all directions. He moved cautiously toward the source of the whispers. His flashlight flickered in the darkness, but he didn't stop. He felt as though he were being drawn into the very heart of the house. The light ahead grew dim, but he pressed forward. He entered a large room that was covered in dark symbols etched into the walls. The air was thick with a sense of oppression. He stepped forward and immediately felt the room change. The shadows seemed to bend and stretch toward him, and then he saw her. The woman from before, standing at the far end of the room. Her long matted hair hung over her face. She turned toward him slowly, her hollow eyes fixed on him with an eerie, unblinking stare. "Why do you come?" she rasped. Her voice was filled with pain and sorrow, but also a chilling finality. He froze, unable to move, his breath caught in his throat as the darkness around him seemed to grow stronger. The woman stepped forward, her long, claw-like fingers reaching toward him. He felt the cold touch of the shadows wrapping around his body. He tried to run, but the air itself seemed to press against him, holding him in place. The he-woman's lips parted once more, but this time, her voice was different. It was louder. "More powerful, you are not the first," she whispered, "and you will not be the last." Her voice echoed around him as the shadows closed in. He tried to scream, but no sound came. The darkness was all around him now, suffocating him, pulling him closer to the woman. "Join us forever." The whispers surrounded him. The house had already claimed him. and there was no escaping its hunger. The shadows wrapped around him tightly as the last bit of his strength drained away. His vision faded to black. The whispers were louder now, the voices of countless souls echoing together. Join us forever. The house fell silent once more. The whispers faded, but only for a moment. The air was still. The room was empty except for the symbols on the walls. The cycle had begun again, with a new soul to join the others trapped within. The house stood still in the darkness, its presence unshakable. The wind whispered through the broken windows as it waited again, for the next victim to come, for the next soul to join the whispers. Days turned into weeks, and still the house stood, casting its long shadow over the desolate town. The wind never ceased to howl as if the earth itself trembled under the weight of what the house contained. Though the town had long been abandoned, whispers of its cursed history continued to spread to anyone who dared listen. But the house did not care. It was patient, waiting for the next soul. A young man named Simon, an urban explorer and thrill seeker, had heard the rumors about the house. His heart raced with excitement at the thought of uncovering the dark truth behind the stories. He had visited many abandoned places before, but this one felt different. The whispers reached him even before he stepped foot on the property, tugging at him, urging him to come closer. As Simon crossed the overgrown path leading to the front door, he felt an unnatural chill settle in his bones. The house seemed to recognize him, its presence looming over him like a hungry predator. The door, once locked and silent, creaked open by itself as he approached. It was a silent invitation. Simon hesitated at the threshold, a strange unease creeping over him. But his curiosity pushed him forward. He entered the door, closing quietly behind him. The air inside was cold, as if it had been untouched for years. But that was impossible. The house was far from empty. As Simon ventured deeper into the house, the whispers began once again. They were faint at first, like a distant murmur, but soon they surrounded him, growing louder and clearer. Join us forever. The words chilled his blood. He froze, listening, wondering if it was just his mind playing tricks on him. But there was something in the air, something alive. Simon moved cautiously down the narrow hallway, his flashlight flickering. The walls seemed to move as if they were breathing. His feet stumbled on the uneven floor, and the floorboards creaked loudly under his weight. The whispers grew louder. Join us forever. Now they seemed to be coming from the very walls, and Simon could not tell if the sounds were real or if his mind had begun to break under the pressure. In the middle of the hallway, Simon found an old mirror, its surface cracked and dirty. As he gazed into it, he felt a cold rush of air, and suddenly his own reflection seemed to twist. The figure in the mirror grinned at him, but Simon did not. He stepped back, heart racing, but the reflection remained, staring at him with hollow, empty eyes. Then it whispered his name. Suddenly a shadow moved in the corner of his vision. He turned, but it was too late. There she was, the woman from before her. Hollow eyes locked onto his with an intense gaze, her lips twisted into a smile of recognition. The shadows around her seemed to twist dark and thick, swallowing the light. You came, she whispered, her voice a hollow rasp. Now you will stay. Simon tried to back away, but the house seemed to close in around him. The walls seemed to pulse with a dark energy. The whispers returned louder than before, echoing in his mind. Join us forever. It was no longer just the woman speaking. The house itself was calling to him, its hunger never satisfied. The darkness gathered, wrapping around him like a shroud. Panic surged through Simon as he tried to escape. He ran through the hallways, but no matter how far he went, the house seemed to stretch forever. Doors that once led outside now led deeper into the house. The whispers followed him, taunting him. The shadows seemed to reach for him, pulling him closer. He could hear footsteps behind him, growing louder, closer. His breath quickened. He was not alone. Finally, Simon stumbled into a room, his body collapsing in exhaustion. He could feel the cold walls closing in on him. The whispers were deafening. Now he turned to see the woman once again standing in the doorway, her eyes hollow and dark. You cannot leave, she whispered, her voice full of malice. You belong to the house now. Simon's body grew cold as the darkness surged toward him. He screamed, but his voice was drowned out by the endless whispers. His vision blurred, and in his last moments he realized the truth. The house never let go. Once it claimed a soul, that soul was trapped forever, an eternal prisoner of the house. The house stood silent once more. The whispers faded, but the walls remained alive, with the presence of the souls trapped inside Simon. was another name on the ever-growing list of those who had entered but never left. The house waited its hunger, never ceasing its walls, whispering, always searching for the next soul to claim. The cycle was eternal. Far off across the empty roads, a new figure appeared walking toward the house. The wind whispered his name and the house stirred, its hunger awakening once again. The moon hung low in the sky as a new figure approached the house. His name was Adam, a thrill-seeker like many before him. The whispers reached him before he even stepped onto the property, a cold breeze that seemed to beckon him forward. Despite all the warnings, despite the stories he had heard, Adam felt an irresistible pull. As Adam reached the threshold, the door creaked open as if expecting him. He hesitated, but then crossed the threshold, stepping into the darkened hallway. The air inside was thick with cold, like a weight pressing down on his chest. It was darker than it should have been, as though the house was closing in on him. The whispers were faint at first, like a distant murmur. "Join us forever." They seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Adam's heart raced as the voice seemed to reach into his very mind, digging into his thoughts, pulling him deeper into the house. He turned around, but the door had already vanished. He was alone. As he ventured through the house, Adam came upon a room unlike any other he had seen before. It was a wide circular chamber, its walls lined with mirrors, all reflecting the same empty room. The air in the room felt heavy, oppressive, as though the house itself was watching him, waiting. The whispers were louder now, coming from the mirrors themselves, as if the house's voices were trapped within them. "Join us forever." Adam could see faint figures flickering in the reflections, shadows moving without form. Suddenly, Adam's reflection in one of the mirrors began to twist. His own image grinned at him, though he did not. The smile on the reflection's face grew wider and more grotesque, its eyes dark and hollow. He reached out to touch the mirror, but his reflection's hand moved, first grabbing his wrist with unnatural force. The reflection's hand tightened around Adam's wrist, pulling him closer to the mirror. The glass felt cold, as if it were alive, and Adam struggled to free himself, but it was too late. The shadow in the mirror began to pull him in. His body moved on its own, dragged toward the glass, while the whispers around him grew to a deafening roar. "Join us forever." The whispers became one voice, louder, more insistent, and the reflection laughed. From behind Adam, a cold breath brushed his neck. He turned to see her, the woman, her eyes hollow, her face twisted with a permanent smile. She stepped forward, her presence filling the room. The shadows in the mirrors seemed to flicker and dance around her, obeying her every movement. "You came," she said, her voice a rasping whisper. "You are mine now." Adam tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. The shadows swarmed around him, reaching out like hands pulling him into the mirrors. He could feel the cold, sharp tendrils of darkness coiling around him, his body no longer his own. He fought against it, but the house's grip was too strong. "Join us forever," the voices chanted now, a chorus of tortured souls. With one last surge of effort, Adam fought back. His vision blurred, his body growing weak. He turned toward the door, which had somehow reappeared, and rushed toward it. The woman's laughter followed him, hollow and mocking. But it was no use. As he reached the door, it slammed shut in his face. The room around him seemed to pulse the walls, breathing the shadows tightening around him. The last thing Adam saw before the darkness fully consumed him was the woman smiling, face, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Join us forever," she whispered one last time. And then everything went black. The house fell silent once more. The whispers died down, but the presence remained. The walls seemed to hum with an eerie energy, as if the house itself was satisfied, its hunger temporarily quelled. But in the mirrors, the figures of Adam and the other lost souls now flickered, trapped forever in the reflections, unable to escape. Somewhere far off beyond the crumbling town and the walls of the house, another figure appeared, walking toward the house, unaware of what awaited. The house stirred again, its whispers beginning to rise, calling out to the next victim. The house stood silent under the moonlight, its dark windows watching the night like hollow eyes. The wind howled softly through the overgrown trees surrounding it, but the whispers were gone. For now, the hunger of the house had been satisfied. Inside, the mirrors reflected nothing but emptiness. The room, once filled with shadows, had returned to a still, cold silence. But beneath the stillness, there was something more, a pulse faint, but constant. The house, alive with its endless hunger, waited.